AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. We're going to get right to it. We've got two great guests today. James Delingpole will join me. We're going to talk about the heat wave in Europe and what sky-falling scenario the left has for you. Number one, and Jerome Hudson's going to talk today, Breitbart's own Jerome Hudson, about Candace Owens and a lot of other stuff, and you're going to hear a soundbite during that interview that's going to blow you away. But we're going to start off with this one. Trump-backed candidates went 5-0 in special elections. One vote, 100 votes, doesn't really matter. They won 5-0. And the left would have you believe that's a sign of a blue wave. While I would argue that they lost all 5, despite the fact that the media and Hollywood have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of hours to create an end-of-the-world scenario. Despite everything they could do, they didn't win. But if you look at the left and clowns like Chuck Todd on NBC's Today, I want you to listen to what he says the Ohio 12th election actually means for the Democratic Party.
Look at the amount of triage that the Republican Party did here. The Democrats weren't really targeting this race. The special election popped up when the sitting member decided to leave early to take a job. And the Republican Party has spent over $3 million just on this single race. They sent in the president at the last minute. So when you think about it, this is a district, as Garrett noted, hasn't been in Democratic Party hands since Ronald Reagan was president. And if it took all of this to essentially get to a tie in a district that the president carried by double digits, they can't do that in 435 districts at the same time in November. You can do it a special election at the time and sort of bail out water and triage and maybe save a district here and save a district there. When they're all on the ballot at the same time, most of these don't go that way. And this is why Democrats, I think, are now heavy favorites to take control of the House. I think the question is really the size. Is it 30 seats, 40 seats, 50 seats? They have a night like this, like they did in Ohio, they could win 40 to 60 seats.
Vince, we're going to need to save that soundbite because you're going to have to remind me after the midterms to replay that. Count the 40 to 60 seats and tag him on Twitter and get him to listen to that over and over again. I will be stunned. I think I'm still buying Newt Gingrich's take. I think we're going to pick up 3 to 5 seats, but we'll see. But again, that was done in the face of everything they could bring to bear. I like how he says they didn't target the election. Look at the tweets coming out of Hollywood. They targeted that election like nobody's business. And then let's skip ahead to a socialist already in office on MSNBC's All In. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. I'm not going to tell you what he said. I'm going to let you listen to what he said. But the fact of the matter is, this to me is, if you want to look up the word treasonous, I would argue that this is exactly what treason looks like and sounds like.
ICE, as a police force, their intent, their purpose, their founding mission was right, which was to fight terrorism, right? We're New York State, 9/11. We want a police force that fights terrorism. We don't want what we have in ICE, which is a politicized police force, which is doing the president's political bidding. And that's really the problem. We don't want him politicizing ICE. We don't want him politicizing the FBI. We don't want him politicizing the U.S. Marshals. And that's what has to be abolished. We do need a police force, obviously, that fights terrorism, but That's not what this police force is doing under this president, because he has politicized it. And we don't want him doing it to ICE or any federal police force. You're supposed to keep your politics away from law enforcement, and that's the violation of this president.
When we talked about the border, there are ways in which the state, obviously, and local authorities interact with federal immigration officials and immigration enforcement. Are there ways in which the state interacts with ICE that you're reconsidering, whether that's sharing data or contracts or anything like that?
I will do nothing cooperatively with ICE. I have sent them letters asking for an investigation. I have said if they do any criminal acts, which a police force can do, we will take criminal action against ICE because I believe they are politically motivated.
Let me just ask you a couple questions. You just heard the governor of New York talk about the fact that this administration has politicized the police force. Are you kidding me? Is this not the party that politicized the FBI and the DOJ to rig a presidential election? And he's arguing about politicizing ICE, which is a lie to begin with. But the fact of the matter is this man belongs to the party that conspired with the Clinton campaign, the Obama administration, the DOJ, and the FBI to rig a presidential election. And he's griping about the fact that ICE is enforcing our border laws. And by the way, he talks about the fact that police can commit criminal acts and how offensive that is to him. Did we not have some of the largest police scandals in this country's history inside the New York Police Department? I mean, this is one of those, it's surreal to hear the words come out of a supposedly intelligent man's mouth. How did this man make millions and billions of dollars if he is this stupid? I don't know. I guess it just goes to prove you don't have to be smart to be rich. Fast forward to his namesake on CNN on Cuomo Primetime. The gift that keeps on giving gave again. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I want you to understand, she's saying in this clip, socialized medicine will be affordable because people will no longer have to pay for funerals.
Thing that we need to realize is people talk about the sticker shock of Medicare for all. They do not talk about the sticker shock of the cost of our existing system. You know, in a Koch brothers funded study, if any study is going to try to be a little bit slanted, it would be one funded by the Koch brothers. It shows that Medicare for all is actually much cheaper than the current system that we pay right now. And let's not forget that the reason that the Supreme Court upheld the Affordable Care Act is because they ruled that these monthly payments that everyday Americans make is a tax. And so while it may not seem like we pay that tax on April 15th, we pay it every single month, or we do pay it tax season if we don't buy, these plans off of the exchange. So we're paying for this system. We Americans have the sticker shock of healthcare as it is. And what we're also not talking about is why aren't we incorporating the cost of all the funeral expenses of those who die because they can't afford access to healthcare? That is part of the cost of our system. Why don't we talk about the cost of reduced productivity because of people who need to go on disability, because of people who are not able to participate in our economy, because they're having issues like diabetes or they don't have access to the health care that they need. I think at the end of the day, we see that this is not a pipe dream. Every other developed nation in the world does this. Why can't America? And that is the question that we need to ask. We have done these things before. We write unlimited blank checks for war. We just wrote a $2 trillion check for that tax cut, the GOP tax cut, and nobody asked those folks how are they going to pay for it. So my question is, why is it that our pockets are only empty when it comes to education and health care for our kids? Why are our pockets only empty when we talk about 100% renewable energy that is going to save this planet and allow our children to thrive? We only have empty pockets when it comes to the morally right things to do. But when it comes to tax cuts for billionaires and when it comes to unlimited war, we seem to be able to invent that money very easily. And to me, it belies a lack of moral priorities that people have right now, especially the Republican Party.
I can't dissect it because every point in it's wrong. Look around the world and understand that nobody has better health care than the United States. Nobody. You can't be denied health care in this country. You can be denied health insurance, but you can't be denied health care. Okay? Again, I love the fact that she continues to speak because every one of these sound bites is going to come back to bite her in the ass if she becomes somebody prominent. The left will never let her be somebody. They can't because of what she represents and what she doesn't represent. A future guest, actually next week I'm going to have this gentleman on, Charlie Curt, the Turning Point USA founder and Chicago native. I want you to listen to him talk about, Rosie had a bus and got it from New York to D.C. full of Broadway stars to protest the White House while people were being shot and killed at a record number this past weekend in Chicago. Listen to Charlie Curt talk about the broken culture problem around Chicago and the mayor.
It's a real tragedy going on in Chicago right now. And what I was really struck by is there was not this huge call for gun control, even from the citizens of Chicago. And, being from Chicago, we have seen the carnage increase over the last couple of years. And it really is a broken culture problem. And the common theme after talking to, my fellow Chicagoans is that we have a lack of father problem in the black community, especially in Chicago. And just one quick statistic, in the 1960s, the single motherhood rate in Chicago and across the country was about 18% in the black community. Now it's over 75%. Think about that. In Chicago, only 25% of young black youth will even have a father in the household. And that has contributed to this endless cycle of gang violence and gun violence. And there's a lot of frustration amongst us Chicagoans about the lack of action from the mayor's office to address this problem correctly, but the bottom line is a broken culture problem.
So Charlie, do you believe that it's okay in Illinois if to let black people shoot black people and there's not enough outrage from the people in power and the people in wealth? Is that the sense? Just contain the violence in one region?
It sure feels that way. It feels as if we have become desensitized to this pattern of violence in certain parts of Chicago. And these are our fellow Americans. This should be deemed absolutely unacceptable. But here's probably the most startling statistic. 0. That's how many arrests have been made from all these shootings over the last weekend. 0. That means these criminals that over 70 people shot, over a dozen people killed, no one has been arrested. And so it's the same people committing the same crimes. And I want to make this perfectly clear. Most Chicagoans are law-abiding, hard-working, gritty, forward-thinking, creative people. Most Chicagoans are not criminals. It is clustered to a couple hundred very, very bad people. And by the way, this war on police will not help us go after the criminals. And as a Chicagoan, I'm disgusted by the lack of action from the mayor's office towards this problem.
What do you mean?
I got to tell you, I feel like at some point, if I was president right now, I would declare a state of emergency in the city of Chicago. I would open up the Chicago budget to allow literally unlimited access to the police force to provide them with the weapons and the materials to go in and clean up. These people don't – Charlie's right. This isn't a majority of Chicago citizens. This is a small group of people who are wreaking havoc, not just in that city but in this country. They need to be stopped. If you need to send the National Guard in, do that. Have a weekend, I would argue, do it, put it literally a milestone, say, listen, the first weekend we can have 0 shootings in the downtown Chicago. We will begin to remove National Guard soldiers. Until then, no. These people need protection. These are American citizens. I don't care that they're black or white or brown or yellow. They're American citizens that are being held hostage in their homes because of the lack of concern that our national government, the local government there and the national government is showing them. Great stuff. Amazing. Charlie will be on next week. Guys, stay tuned. I got a great show lined up today. James Delingpole, his podcast comes out on Thursdays, will be up. And then Jerome Hudson after that. Be back in just a minute.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I want to actually take a couple of the references to Donald Trump from hip-hop. And then we're going to try to see if we can figure out why they like Donald Trump. Jay-Z said, I'm at the Trump International. Ask for me. Raekwon said, I'm the black Trump. They are comparing themselves to what he represents. His wealth, his achievement. Capitalism.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now, as he does as often as he can, a very busy man. He is the host of the Delingpole podcast, which comes out weekly on Thursdays on Breitbart.com. He is the one and only James Delingpole. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Curt. It's good to be back on your show, and I hope you're enjoying your summer.
I am. Listen, I was going to go right to the summer and the heat wave, but the first thing I need to ask you is, please explain to me what a grade A chocolate-coated plunker is, because apparently there is some people in Silicon Valley, and as soon as I saw the quote in your article, I laughed, because that is just perfectly you.
Yeah, but you know what? This was one of the guys on the other side of the argument who was using that phrase. He was one of the enemy, I would say. But I think it's very important as internet censorship increases, particularly if you're on the conservative side of the argument, that you need a range of insults which tell the other person exactly what you think of them without getting you kind of banned from Twitter. I mean, if you look at the F word and the C word now used on Twitter, it's almost always leftists who are using it. We conservatives use more imaginative terms like plonker and twonk and just
haven't heard either.
Just words that have been invented to just show people to be idiots.
One of the discussions that is around not only freedom of speech, but this whole Tommy Robinson thing and what's happening in democratic or I want to use air quotes, free countries. The left is trying to defend this as not an attack on free speech. I don't know how they're in their own minds they're actually trying to justify that, but that's exactly what it is. But I wanted to ask you because my wife and my youngest are in Prague for a hockey tournament, and my son is playing on the USA team. And I couldn't believe this, but they were talking to me about how scorchingly hot it is in Europe. And I read your article, and I was wondering, a lot of people don't look at science. They just say as soon as it gets hot, it's like, oh, there, see, it's global warming, which, we can go back, 10, 15, 20 years and find the same article in some paper over in Europe.
Yeah, I think there was because everyone's been so brainwashed by the great climate change scare, everyone imagines that the main driver of the weather is people driving 4x4s and taking flights and stuff. And actually the weather is and always has been caused by things that, I think that mainly the oceans are a very significant driver of weather. So at the moment, this massive heat wave that we're enjoying in Europe, or not enjoying, because people have suffered. People have been burned alive in Greece, for example. There've been terrible fires. But nevertheless, for those of us in the UK, for example, it's been glorious to have week after week of just unrelenting sun, which we don't get normally. We normally have to take vitamin D tablets to make up for the lack of sun. And but this current heat wave in Europe, and I got this from a meteorologist, American meteorologist called Joe Bastardi, whose website is very worth visiting, and he explained that what this has to do with is this massive extreme cooling in the Atlantic, and also in the tropics. And if you look at the sort of the heat map of the world right now, of sea temperatures, you see this blue band across the Atlantic, huge band of cold. And what it's done is it's squeezed out this sort of narrow strip of warm in the north, which just goes across Europe. So I don't think this is a dread harbinger of summers to come.
It's actually the exact opposite, is it not?
The opposite.
This giant heat wave is because of a cooling.
Yeah.
Actually, but again, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we should be savoring this summer like it's the last decent summer some of us may ever see, because global cooling is going to take away all our fun.
this is rare. This is, and here's my issue though, and I wanted you to talk through that for a specific reason. The left would have you believe, without any science, oh my God, it's super hot in Europe. That just proves global warming. You actually went to people who do the work, the job, the meteorologists, and got data based on actual factual history, and it becomes much more rational and reasonable when you start to look at, the world is going to end. The opposite view of the sky is falling. Yeah. It's a story we hear every couple years or every couple decades about the climate. It's at the end. No matter what. Again, acid rain, ice age, global warming, climate change. The language has changed because it has to change because they're wrong every time they jump on one of these attacks, and science ends up proving it to be completely false.
Yeah, there's a guy that I often quote in my Breitbart columns, a guy called Paul Homewood, who and there's quite a few people like Paul Homewood. There's Stephen Goddard as well, and I sometimes go to the WhatsApp with that site and so on. But there are a few guys out there, and they are mostly guys, who rather than jumping on the scaremongering bandwagon, just look at the raw data. For example, I mean, one of the things that really annoys me as an Englishman about this kind of hysteria about, oh my God, we've got some hot weather, isn't it awful? It's the end of the world. I remember the last time Britain had a really, really long hot summer, and you know when that was? You were probably especially born there, Curt. It was 1976. What were you doing in 1976?
I was 10 years old, living in Arizona.
Okay, so I think you're about the same age as me. So you and I can agree that 1976 was a long, long time ago. I mean, it was disco was the fashion. Donna Summer was in the charts, and Chicago, and I don't know, maybe ELO singing Mr. Blue Sky.
Donald Trump was winning.
So I've had to wait all my adult life and more for a summer to match the single summer I had in my childhood. And guess when the previous one was? The hot summer before 1976 in the UK. It was in 1911. Yeah. So it's not like these things are very common.
But if you listen to Bob Ward, who is writing in defense of global warming, a scientific paper found a rapid increase in summer temperatures since the mid-90s over Western Europe. The trend for hotter summers is obvious from Met Office records, with 8 of the 10 warmest years having occurred since 1995. That's the same fallacy they're pushing over here, is it not?
Do you know what? I'm really depressed for you, Curt, that you know who Bob Ward is. Bob Ward. Yeah. It's a bit like me knowing who Chelsea Handler is, which I don't, by the way. I've made it my mission not to know who Chelsea Handler is. I just know that she's a bad thing. I don't know anything about her. But it's the same with Bob Ward. Do you know what Bob Ward does? He's basically there's a hedge fund billionaire called Jeremy Grantham, who I think he's based in the US, but he funds these various foundations in the UK, and Bob Ward is his kind of attack dog. Bob is his paid shill. Bob's job is to read any articles by people like me, and then report them to the Press Complaints Authority in order to wear them down with procedure, and this is just a small, tiny corner of the world of climate change alarmism. These people are just horrible, horrible, ugly people who don't want the truth to come out, and the way they do that is by bullying, by throwing money at the problem, by denigrating people like me, and it's horrible.
They just lie. I mean, it's that simple.
They do lie. Yeah.
But again, all of these discussions for me go back to, again, the book that you pointed me to, Green Tyranny. There is an enormous amount of money in this for them. And that's, when people say, oh, why would people lie about climate change? Well, there's an incredibly financially lucrative incentive to lie about climate change. And, ask Al Gore if you want to ask somebody as he flies from climate change meeting to climate change meeting in his private jets. This is these people want us to act as if the world is going to end while they don't. I mean, this is the socialism, right? Socialism is good for everybody but me. And, we're watching this. Like I said, as soon as it gets 90 degrees, somebody in the U.S. or the U.K. is going to scream about the fact that we're killing the ozone. James, it's always a pleasure. Listen, I want to ask you real quick, though. Can you give me the latest? We're not getting a lot of news on Tommy Robinson over here, and I'm wondering how things are going since he got out.
I think Tommy is having a well-earned break after he was effectively, certainly by his account, he was effectively tortured in prison by the British authorities. He had to spend his time in solitary confinement for his own safety, because if he mingled with other prisoners, there are so many Muslims in the population that he would end up getting stabbed.
Really?
He couldn't eat any prison food because it was prepared again by the Muslims who were on a mission to, either they put excrement in his food or powdered glass or he didn't know what. So he basically had to survive on one piece of fruit and one can of tuna a day. Now, interestingly, the prison authorities are denying this. The Her Majesty's Prison Service issued a statement saying that this was all lies, that he was only in solitary for 2 days, and that he didn't suffer. Well, all I know is that I saw video footage of him when he came out, and he looked a skinny and broken man. So who do you believe? Do you believe the state that put him there in the first place, or do you believe Tommy Robinson? I'm inclined to believe Tommy, and I'm just very, very glad he's out, and I hope that he'll agree to do a podcast with me when he gets out.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him as well, so put a good word in for me if you do that. But it's terrifying to think that that's what can happen to a private citizen if you piss off your government, because that's exactly what happened. That was nothing more, nothing less than state intimidation. He could have very easily been killed in prison without the state doing anything, given what they exposed him to. So, James, always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Curt. Take care.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is, he doesn't join me enough anymore because he's becoming this high and mighty, powerful guy, I guess. He is Breitbart's own Jerome Hudson. Good morning, Jerome. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning. It's good to be back.
Hey, listen, I want to play a soundbite for you. This was on MSNBC's The Beat last night, and this is Candace Owens, who was on the show the other day, getting into a heated debate. We didn't play the whole soundbite from the professor out of Georgetown because it was 5 minutes of just rambling BS. But I want you to listen to this because, Jerome, I often ask you this from a black man or a black woman's perspective. I want to hear what people in the black community, who live in the black community, who grew up in the black community, have to say about what's going on. And I want to get your take on this soundbite. Go ahead and listen. Go ahead and roll that for me, Vince.
We've seen the resurgence of an attempt to nullify and destroy that black vote. We've seen attempts to somehow circumnavigate around black political citizenry and agency. So all I'm saying is, if we're concerned about black people, we've got to be concerned about poverty, inequality, lack of access to education, plus the kinds of sorts of violence that we see directed toward black people in this country.
Candace, go ahead. conversation, sorts of violence as being directed towards black people. Am I black? I'm curious if I'm black because I'm a black conservative, and I am not hearing anything that is said about the fact that about 25 white Democrats assembled to kick me out of a restaurant yesterday, to throw water and to throw eggs at me because I am a conservative that supports Donald Trump. The very same Donald Trump, okay? The very same Donald Trump that has not Obama. Obama did not do this. It's because of President Trump slashing regulations, and it has brought this economy to a place it has never been at, okay? We have unemployment that's an all-time low for both women. You brought up women, you brought up gays, you brought up black people. Unemployment is at an all-time low across the board. You guys refuse to acknowledge the truth that we are doing better. You want to talk about fascists? Antifa attacked me. This is an all-white gang that attacked me and attacked an all-black police force in Philadelphia, okay? And they claim to be fighting racism. How is it plausible, Professor, that you allow this to happen to your community because you decided that because we are ideologically conservatives, you are okay with this? You're okay with the resurgence of the Democrats?
I haven't said a word.
Don't cut me off.
I haven't said a word.
You just said a lot of words.
I didn't say a word.
If somebody was counting,
I said nothing about you.
Now you're cutting me off.
I said nothing about you.
No.
I find what happened to you reprehensible, by the way.
I still have to keep it going. Candace, we're going to take a pause.
No,
Candace,
I didn't get to finish.
I'm going to let
you for 5 minutes straight. You are attacking your
argument that you just finish, but if you're calling out the professor, I have to give him time. So, Candace, go ahead.
Liberals have been attacking conservatives, and you guys say nothing about it. Blacks were attacked yesterday, okay? And they were attacked because they support Donald Trump. Black support for Donald Trump has doubled since this time last year. You guys can try to pretend that he is pushing in a racist era in this country when, in fact, we know the Democrats are the racists, have always been the racists. The parties never switched, and you should know this as a civil rights person. You know the history. You know the people under the hood of the KKK.
Let me respond.
Were
Candace,
Democrats, and the party never switched. And
Candace, I'm going to give the professor a chance to respond.
You should defend what happened to me yesterday and defend our community being attacked because we support Donald Trump, because we understand that we have better economic opportunities under him than we ever had in Obama.
And
shame on you for spreading in Obama.
Candace, I'm going to give the professor a chance to respond.
Under his administration, he allowed the bloodshed, and Trump wanted to send the National Guard, and the Democrats stopped him. I'm really done with this. I'm done with this
I don't want to have to talk over people, but we have to go back and forth.
Let's talk about the facts.
Candace?
Okay, first of all, let me just be clear. I'm an enormously biased, huge, incredibly big fan of Candace Owens because I love strong women. Black, white, Chinese, I don't care. I love strong women. She's clearly highly intelligent. She just made a Georgetown professor look like a complete idiot, which he was. I'm curious, though. I found his circumventing his comments around the disadvantages of being black to me sound like he's talking about 1955 or 1960, not 2018.
Right, and poor Ari Milber. I mean, the guy could. I did see the clip. I've actually been on Michael Eric Dyson's radio show. This is many, many years ago. He's always been nice to me. But you're absolutely right. I mean, what Candace Owens did was she out-filibustered Michael Eric Dyson, who is the king of filibustering. And what Candace Owens did was she refuted this idea that Michael Eric Dyson puts out, and it's largely a talking point on the left, that in order to solve the problems that seem to stalk black people the most, we just need to throw money at it, right? And so Michael Eric Dyson brought up the fact that there's violence and there's few educational opportunities and work for black people. But right now, like, because of Donald Trump's economic agenda, like, there are more jobs than anyone, black, white, or brown, can actually work on. I mean, the idea that we shouldn't actually ask the question of, well, if there's violence and there are dozens and dozens of people being shot in one weekend in Chicago, the idea that we shouldn't ask, like, what role does racism play in that? And for Michael Eric Dyson, he can't actually answer that question because there is no role that racism played. The police who actually came in and tried to protect those neighborhoods, they're black, they're white, right? Like, race doesn't actually play a factor there. And so, no, she absolutely just blew up his entire
and you heard
narrative.
her say this. I mean, think about this. 25 to 30 white men and women got a black woman kicked out of a restaurant and then called the multiracial mix-up of police officers who came to her defense. They called them racist. I mean, it is such a twisted take on reality that it almost feels like the big lie from Hitler, right? You just lie so big that people will say, well, it can't be a lie. This is, I mean, I've been taught in the last year and a half that apparently black people can't be racist because they're black. I don't understand that, but sure, okay, I'll ride with it. I can't come to a logical conclusion, but the level of irrational response is ratcheting up with the level of physical response from the left. We're seeing violence against minorities by white people. And the irony is not lost on me. It is lost on the left. But let me repeat again, 25 white people who claim to be fighting for black people's rights kicked a black woman out of a restaurant and then assaulted her by every definition of the law when she was in public.
I saw that video, and I watched it a few times, and I was actually looking for one of those violent protesters who wasn't white. Like, I don't think I saw one. But what I did see was, as you mentioned, the police presence. I mean, there were women, there were blacks, there were brown people. Like, the police force that came to protect Candace Owens was more racially diverse than the actual violent protesters. But see, I actually was, as horrific and awful as that video was to watch, I was actually heartened because the protesters, I mean, none of them were more than 30 years old, Curt. Like, they don't have jobs. Like, these kids may still actually be mindless denizens of some local college in that town. And, and so I'm heartened.
One of the most important things that I didn't realize right off, I thought about it, but Candace made a really good point. This went from 3 people to about 30 in 15 minutes at 8 a.m. in the morning. These are clearly people without a job. And these are, these are people that well, actually this is their job. Their job is to organize. I mean, in all honesty, this is, when people talk about being paid, I mean, you heard Rosie O'Donnell, that just repulsive, repugnant human being, talk about most of the people at Trump rallies are paid to be there, which is completely false.
Crazy.
It is they are, once again, the thing they claim to hate. These people are paid, which again, I don't care that they're paid. Just admit it. You gutless cowards, admit it. But the fact of the matter is, you could have filmed it, if this had been filmed in black and white, you could have pushed this back to the 1960s, except for the fact that the police officers were all multiracial, men, women, black, brown. I mean, this was exactly what they did.
I look at all of this as evidence that people like you and me are not crazy, and that the majority of this country is not crazy, and that the majority of this country is not being fooled, right? I just know that when people are pressed against a hard reality, that is, we have a president now, for all of his personal flaws, you cannot argue against the fact that the man's policies and his agenda, the promises that he made to the millions of people who voted for him, are turning this country around faster than it did under Barack Obama, who came into a recession but used trillion-dollar big government policies to just wreck the economy. And so I see the people who attack Candace Owens, and I am heartened by it. Like, there were 2 guys who were treated horribly in a left-wing Starbucks coffee shop. That video was played by all the major networks. These idiots will not play what happened to Candace Owens because we know why, right? They have to control the narrative. And by controlling the narrative, they can't allow people to see left-wing activists being violent and bigoted against a black woman simply because she has opinions different than theirs. And so the way that they control the narrative is that they don't actually show Americans. But that in and of itself is an example of how stupid they think people are. Like, people don't need to see ABC and MSNBC not showing that video.
Right.
The internet exists.
That's what's killing them. That's what's killing mainstream media, is the fact that every single one of us is a news reporter waiting to happen. We all have our cameras, and we're catching things that the news doesn't catch itself. Number one, excuse me. More importantly, number two, when they do catch it, they don't show it, and there's a reason, because goes back to the plain and simple logical argument is they are the very thing they profess to be against. These are fascist. anti-free speech, racist, biased, sexist. I mean, this is a black woman, a strong black woman, and she's being attacked by people like Kathy Griffin and these skanks in Hollywood. I don't even. I want to switch gears before we. Go ahead.
But I made the point earlier that on Monday, you mentioned Rosie O'Donnell rented a bus from New York to D.C. with a bunch of Broadway singers to sing and protest outside the White House. That happened on Monday. And as I mentioned earlier, Chicago saw, 70 people being shot? I thought an act of bravery and an act of resistance would actually be if some Hollywood star, it could be Rosie O'Donnell, renting a bus and going and protesting outside of City Hall and asking Rahm Emanuel why he's been mayor in Chicago for years. And this persistent problem of gang violence and mindless maimings has happened. The guy gets let off the hook by the same national media that crucified Trump every night. I mean, it's a war zone in that city, and it has been for years. And they don't hold him to the same standard. And in Hollywood protests, they go down to the border, but they don't actually speak about the victims and the parents who've had to bury their children because people who are in this country illegally killed them. But they go down to the border. It's not brave to protest and sing outside of the White House. Take your ass to Chicago, okay? Go to the west side and the south side of Chicago and protest there, because those people are being victimized in a way that you say President Trump is victimizing people.
Right. Hey, I don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you, this whole James Gunn thing has me sick to my stomach. Nothing in those tweets was funny. Nothing in his past tweet. I don't know what kind of dirtbag jokes about pedophilia to begin with. Pedophilia is not taboo in comedy. It doesn't exist. There's nothing about a pedophilia joke that's funny. Nothing. I don't know any other way to put that. The stuff that he did, that wasn't the rantings of a comic. That wasn't the rantings. That was somebody who was very comfortable in making commentary about things that are so repulsively disgusting to any. Listen, if you're a man, nothing about that is even. But Hollywood has gone batshit crazy to get James Gunn rehired after Rosie O'Donnell Roseanne Barr was fired for she claims was she's distancing herself from her content. He's actually embracing it.
Right.
I mean, this pedophilia, perverted society that is Hollywood and the D.C. Beltway, this is a bad thing that is real.
And we've made the point at Breitbart to also highlight the fact that James Gunn ran his own blog, and he deleted it within hours of his old pedophilia and rape, and he joked about AIDS, he joked about Mexicans, he joked about the Holocaust. He deleted that blog within hours of those tweets resurfacing. Now, on that blog, he posted a video that he received from a person who was later convicted of possessing child pornography. So we've always made the point that James Gunn's issues extend far beyond horrific, bad joke tweets, right? Like it has a relationship with the man who has, delved in some illegality in terms of child pornography. But I mean, I guess the long and short of it is that, James Gunn and Roseanne Barr were both fired by the same corporation, and that is Disney. And so the push to get James Gunn rehired will not go anywhere. There are reports that there have been major studios approaching him and dangling future products in front of him. But that, I assure you, has not happened to Roseanne Barr. And so the lesson there and the point to be made is that whatever Disney thought was depraved and detestable and they distanced themselves from James Gunn, there are reportedly major studios that don't find his actions as a 40-year-old man tweeting about pedophilia and child rape. There are major studios in Hollywood and in the entertainment sector that don't actually find those things depraved and are waving big bags of money and projects in front of him. That's not happening to Roseanne Barr, and we know why.
We're going to find out in the years to come that this pedophilia, sexual assault thing in Hollywood is real. We've already heard I've heard from enough actors. All of the suicides and the drug problems and the alcohol problems and all the messes of lives that have been that got people that have taken their own lives, a lot of it comes full circle and makes sense when you think about this as a background. When you think about the perversion and the pedophilia that a lot of people claim is part and parcel of getting into Hollywood. Right. There's too many voices that have spoken up to not believe for a fact that some of this, if not much of this, is actually absolute. Listen, if an industry can physically intimidate Terry Crews, there's nobody that they can't.
And these are the people who are trying to tell Americans how to vote, who to vote for, why they should vote for them. Let's think about that.
Hey, Jerome, listen. It's always a pleasure, buddy. We never get enough time. God bless you. Thank you for coming on. Look forward to catching up again.
Thank you for having me.
The loser today was very easy. You heard it during the sound bites. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is my loser today because he actually said in broad daylight and publicly on television that he will do nothing. Let me repeat this. He will do nothing cooperatively with ICE. A governor of a state in this country, of a city in this country, has publicly confessed that he will not help law enforcement do its job. I'm not sure how that is even remotely legal, number one. But number two, how do you keep your politically appointed seat when you refuse to work with the very people who are enforcing the laws that you've set? I don't understand in any way, shape, or form how that happens. But that man is a disaster, and I pray that he is. Well, every time a new one comes out, I pray for them to be running on the presidential candidate ticket for the left. You heard the Ocasio-Cortez soundbite. I mean, her level of dumb just gets bigger and longer and wider every day. So anyway, she and he are just, I don't know, stunning. It's stunning to me. My winner is, I want you guys, if you can, to go to Breitbart.com and check out the article on Laura Ingraham. She gave an impassioned speech, and she's right, about Alex Jones. And the point of the matter is this, and it's true. Alex Jones being banned isn't about free speech. It doesn't have anything to do about free speech, and it has everything to do with freedom and access to information, which is exactly what the internet is for all of us, but now is becoming less and less for some of us. And it's troubling, but she did a great piece. She spelled it out perfectly. And if you get a chance, go to Breitbart.com and check out the article, because it is, and the audio to listen to what she said, because it's very, very relevant to what we're dealing with on the internet, which I think is going to become a much bigger problem than it already is. So there you go. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Look forward to catching up with you guys tomorrow. We'll be back and let you know. Charlie Kirk will be joining us next week, and when we get those dates, we'll let you know. God bless. Have a great day. We'll catch up later.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place?
I called it kissing the ring, because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.